This video will be going over ketamine in more detail than the previous time we talked about it in NMDA receptor antagonists with regards to other diseases such as Alzheimer's, the indications that are currently present, which is PTSD, major depression, treatment-resistant depression, and basically how it works. And let's get started. So the most important thing to know about ketamine is unlike most antidepressants, it has other effects that affect the cell morphology. That just means the shape of the cell. So our brains are made of neurons. We have these two right here, right? Although you can't see them, if you were to look at a different image, for instance, there's these little, basically, think of them as thorns on a piece of like a stick or something. Those are what dendritic spines are, all right? And so these bumps can basically change in size in response to BDNF, which stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor, all right? So ketamine is able to increase this, and this is an important molecule that has been implicated in PTSD, treatment-resistant depression, and in PTSD, which is basically a person becomes hyper-responsive to a stimuli. If you want to summarize it, having more dendritic spines present can basically allow for new connections to form. Right? So how does ketamine work? You have this neuron that releases glutamate. All right, glutamate is the primary excitatory neurotransmitter. I want to make a clear distinction that neurotransmitters tend to act a certain way, but it always depends on the receptor. There's always exceptions with some receptors, right? But generally speaking, glutamate is excitatory and it acts on the NMDA receptor and the AMPA receptor. These are important in learning and memory. I talked about the NMDA receptor in my other video, but we'll focus on the AMPA receptor in this video because ketamine actually blocks the NMDA receptor, which is interesting because this one will cause this cell to be activated just like this one would, except this one usually is blocked, and when it's open, it actually causes more excitation. And if you think about it, depression, excitation, you can think about it in that sense, but by giving somebody a mood lift is because their neurons are more active than typical, right? It's hard to be sad if you have a lot of energy, if you could put it, maybe think of it in that sense, right? So this neuron can signal to this neuron. How does ketamine work when you see it blocking and blocking? Well, there's something known as double inhibition, right? So this neuron right here releases GABA. It's called an interneuron because it's in between two neurons, right? It's basically not minding its business. These two neurons are directly in communication, but it's basically there modifying the activity. It could be either a gas or a brake, but since it has GABA in it, in these vesicles, then it's a brake. They release a GABA, and then there's this GABA receptor, which is a chloride channel. And since chloride has a minus charges decrease the neuron's activity, and plus charges increase the activity of a neuron. So GABA inhibits this neuron. This neuron is not able to activate this neuron, right? So by blocking what blocks this neuron, then this neuron can be active. So it's inhibiting the inhibitor. But if there's something that's going to remove the brake, this is known as double inhibition. You have inhibition of an inhibitor. Now the activator can activate normally. And once this glutamate binds to the AMPA receptor, it's going to cause signaling cascades. Example here says AKT. AKT is very important in cell survival. The default for all our cells is actually cell death or apoptosis. So AKT is basically needed to be alive. ERK, this is, I think it's also a mitogen, it promotes growth. mTor definitely promotes growth. It stands for mammalian targeted rapamycin. And EF2 is called elongation factor 2. I believe it's important in translation in eukaryotic cells. Synaptogenesis and connectivity, that just means that you're going to make new synapses and create new connections, which I mentioned earlier. So in the presence of the AKT and whatnot that are activated, they cause cellular plasticity. This means that the cell can gain properties to where it can be modified. The reason why this is critical is because we have these things called, no pun intended, called critical periods. For instance, you can only learn at a certain period in your life certain things, right? But plasticity sometimes enables certain things that are supposed to be over in a critical period uh, be possible. A good example is language development. Plasticity is the ability to learn new things, your ability to adapt to the environment, your ability to manage stress.